Hannah Adelaide had stopped believing in love the day her father sold her mother's wedding ring to pay off a gambling debt. And she certainly wasn't about to start believing again just because some dusty cowboy had wandered into Benton, Arkansas, with promises in his eyes and a lopsided grin that made her traitorous heart skip a beat. The year was 1878, and Hannah had seen enough broken promises in her 22 years to fill the Arkansas River twice over. She stood behind the counter of Miller's General Store, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, her green eyes fixed on the ledger before her as she calculated the week's earnings. The bell above the door chimed, and she glanced up just long enough to see him walk in. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck beneath his worn Stetson. His jaw was dusted with stubble, and his eyes were the color of whiskey in lamplight, warm and golden brown. He carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who knew his way around hard work and harder roads. "Help you?" Hannah asked, her tone clipped and professional. The cowboy removed his hat, revealing more of that unruly dark hair. "Looking for supplies, trail food mostly. And maybe some conversation with a pretty lady if she is inclined." Hannah's jaw tightened. "The supplies I can help with, the conversation will cost you extra." To her surprise, he laughed, a rich sound that seemed to fill the entire store. "Fair enough, miss. I will take 3 pounds of salt pork, some cornmeal, coffee, and a new canteen. Mine sprung a leak 2 days back." She moved efficiently through the store, gathering his items and wrapping them in brown paper. As she worked, she could feel his eyes on her, not in the leering way some men looked at women, but with genuine curiosity. "You always this friendly to customers?" he asked. "You always this forward with shopkeepers? Only the ones who look like they forgot how to smile." Hannah's hands stilled on the counter. She looked up at him, ready to tell him exactly where he could take his observations, but something in his expression stopped her. There was no cruelty there, no mockery, just a gentle honesty that felt foreign in this town of liars and dreamers. "That will be $4.60, she said instead. He counted out the money, his fingers calloused and strong. As he handed her the coins, their hands brushed, and Hannah felt an unexpected jolt of warmth travel up her arm. "Name is Jackson Edwards," he said. "Most folks call me Jack. Most folks here call me Miss Adelaide, and I prefer to keep it that way." "Well, Miss Adelaide," Jack said, gathering his supplies, "I will be in town for a while, working at the Harrison Ranch, helping with their cattle drive preparation. Suppose I will be seeing you around." "Suppose you might," Hannah replied, turning back to her ledger as if his presence meant nothing at all. But after he left, she found herself staring at the door for a long moment, the scent of leather and sage lingering in the air. That evening, as Hannah walked home to the small cottage she rented on the edge of town, she passed the saloon where her father likely sat drinking away what little money he had left. She quickened her pace, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The September air carried a hint of autumn coolness, and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her cottage was modest but clean, with white lace curtains she had sewn herself, and a small garden out back where she grew vegetables and herbs. It was her sanctuary, the one place in the world that belonged entirely to her. She lit the oil lamp and set about making dinner, a simple affair of beans and cornbread. As she ate, she thought about Jackson Edwards despite her best efforts not to. There had been something different about him, something that set him apart from the other drifters and cowboys who passed through Benton on their way to somewhere else. But Hannah had learned the hard way that different did not mean better. Her mother had thought her father was different too, right up until the day the consumption took her, and he could not even be bothered to stay sober for the funeral. Love was a fairy tale, and Hannah Adelaide had stopped believing in fairy tales long ago. The next morning, she arrived at the store to find a small bunch of wildflowers tied with a piece of twine sitting on the doorstep. There was no note, but somehow she knew they were from Jack. She picked them up, inhaled their sweet scent, and then promptly set them aside, refusing to let such a simple gesture affect her. But when old Mr. Miller arrived an hour later, he found her arranging the flowers in a glass jar filled with water. "Got an admirer, Miss Adelaide?" he asked with a knowing smile. Mr. Miller was in his 60s, with kind eyes and a grandfatherly manner that had made working for him these past 3 years bearable. "Just someone with more money than sense," Hannah replied. "Or maybe someone with good taste and the courage to show it." Hannah did not respond, but she left the flowers on the counter where she could see them throughout the day. Jack came in again that afternoon, this time with a torn shirt that needed mending thread. He pretended to browse the store, but Hannah could see him watching her from the corner of his eye. "Thank you for the flowers," she found herself saying, surprising them both. His face lit up with a genuine smile. "You are welcome. Saw them growing wild by the river and thought they matched the color of your eyes. You do not even know what color my eyes are. Green as spring grass with little flecks of gold near the center." Hannah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You are very observant, Mr. Edwards. Jack, please. And I notice the things worth noticing." She wrapped his thread, taking her time with the brown paper. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what? Trying to charm me. I am just a shopkeeper in a dusty town. You will be gone in a few weeks when the cattle drive heads out." Jack leaned against the counter, his expression turning serious. "Maybe I am tired of moving on. Maybe I am looking for a reason to stay." "Then you are looking in the wrong place, with the wrong person." "I do not think I am." Before Hannah could respond, the bell chimed and Mrs. Patterson entered, full of gossip about the upcoming church social. Jack tipped his hat to both women and left, and Hannah found herself disappointed by his departure. Over the following weeks, Jack became a regular fixture at the store. He always had some excuse, some supply he needed, some question about the town. And every time, he tried to coax a smile from Hannah, tried to draw her out of the protective shell she had built around herself. He told her about his life, how he had been raised on a ranch in Texas, until his parents died of yellow fever when he was 16. He had worked his way across the territories, learning everything there was to know about cattle and horses, saving every penny he could. "What are you saving for?" Hannah asked one day, her curiosity getting the better of her reserve. "A place of my own." "Not a big spread, just enough land for a small herd, a good house, maybe a family someday." "That sounds nice," Hannah admitted, letting her guard down for just a moment. "What about you? What do you want, Hannah Adelaide?" It was the first time he had used her first name, and it sent a shiver through her. "I want to not worry about where my next meal is coming from. I want to not have to count every penny 3 times before spending it. I want to not have my heart broken." "Who broke your heart?" "Everyone who was supposed to love me." The words came out more raw than she intended, and she immediately regretted them. But Jack did not look at her with pity. Instead, he reached across the counter and gently took her hand. "Not everyone," he said quietly. "Some of us still believe in keeping our promises." Hannah wanted to pull away, wanted to tell him that promises meant nothing, that words were just air and hope was a poison. But the warmth of his hand, the sincerity in his eyes made her pause. "Why me?" she whispered. "There are plenty of girls in this town who would welcome your attention. Girls who know how to laugh and flirt and believe in happy endings. Because you are real. Because you have been hurt and you are still standing. Because when you finally do smile, it is going to mean something." Hannah did pull away then, but not out of anger. She was frightened by how much she wanted to believe him, by how much she wanted to lean into that warmth and let herself hope again. "The church social is this Saturday," she heard herself say. "Mr. Miller is closing the store early so everyone can attend. Will you be there?" "I suppose I will." "Then so will I." The church social was held in the field behind the white clapboard church on the hill. The women of Benton had been cooking for days, and long tables groaned under the weight of pies, cakes, fried chicken, biscuits, and every kind of preserves imaginable. Lanterns hung from poles, casting a warm glow as the sun began to set. Hannah wore her best dress, a simple green cotton that brought out her eyes. She had taken extra care with her hair, letting it fall in soft waves around her shoulders instead of pulling it back in her usual severe bun. Jack found her almost immediately, and the look on his face made all her extra efforts worthwhile. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." He did. Gone were the dusty trail clothes, replaced by dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. His hair was neatly combed, his jaw freshly shaved. They filled their plates and found a spot away from the main crowd, sitting on a blanket beneath an old oak tree. For the first time since they had met, conversation came easily. Hannah told him about her childhood, about the mother she had adored and lost, about the father she could not forgive. "He was not always like this," she explained, tearing apart a piece of cornbread. "When my mother was alive, he was different. He worked hard, came home every night, told us stories that made us laugh. But when she died, it was like something in him died too. He started drinking, gambling, disappearing for days. I was 17 when I realized I was going to have to take care of myself. That is too young to be alone. I managed. Mr. Miller hired me and I found the cottage. I send my father money when I can, though he just spends it on whiskey." Jack was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you ever think about leaving, starting fresh somewhere new?" "Where would I go? I have no family, no connections. At least here I have a job, a place to live. You could go anywhere. You are smart, hardworking, capable. Any town would be lucky to have you. It is not that simple." "Why not?" Hannah set down her plate and looked at him directly. "Because leaving means hoping for something better, and hope has only ever disappointed me." "Hannah," Jack said, and his voice was so gentle it made her throat tight, "not everyone is going to let you down. You do not know that. You cannot promise that. I can promise that I will try my best not to. I can promise that if you give me a chance, I will show you that love is not just something that exists in storybooks." There it was. The word she had been avoiding, the concept she had sworn off. Love. It hung between them like something fragile and terrifying. "Jack, I do not know if I can. I do not know if I remember how." He reached out and cupped her cheek with his hand, his thumb brushing gently across her skin. "Then let me teach you. Let me show you what it is supposed to be like." Hannah's breath caught. Every instinct told her to pull away, to protect herself, to run before he could hurt her. But there was something in his eyes, something steady and true that made her want to be brave. "I am scared," she admitted. "I know, but I am right here and I am not going anywhere." The music started then, a fiddle and guitar playing a lively tune. Couples moved toward the makeshift dance floor and Jack stood, offering his hand. "Dance with me." It was not a question, but it was not quite a command either. It was an invitation, and Hannah found herself taking his hand and letting him lead her to where the other couples were already spinning and laughing. Jack was a good dancer, confident and sure-footed. He held her at a respectful distance at first, but as the song went on and Hannah began to relax, he pulled her closer. She could feel the heat of his body, smell the clean scent of soap and something uniquely him. "You are thinking too hard," he murmured near her ear. "I am trying not to step on your feet. You are doing fine. Better than fine." They danced through 3 songs, and by the end of the third, Hannah was laughing, actually laughing, at something silly Jack had whispered about the banker's wife and her ridiculous hat. The sound felt foreign in her throat, rusty from disuse, but also wonderful. When the music slowed, Jack pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers against his chest. They swayed together, and Hannah let herself rest her head against his shoulder. "This is nice," she whispered. "It is just the beginning." They stayed at the social until the lanterns began to dim and mothers gathered up sleepy children. Jack walked Hannah home, her arm tucked through his. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. At her door, he did not try to kiss her, though Hannah found herself wishing he would. Instead, he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Good night, Hannah Adelaide. Thank you for giving me a chance. Just one dance, Jack Edwards. Do not go thinking you have won me over. Wouldn't dream of it. But I will be back at that store tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until you realize that this is real." After he left, Hannah stood on her porch for a long time, her hand pressed against her chest where her heart was beating faster than it had in years. She was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Maybe, just maybe, she could let herself hope again. The next few weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and growing affection. Jack came to the store every day, sometimes with legitimate needs, sometimes with the flimsiest of excuses. He always brought her something: a flower, a smooth stone from the river, once a perfect robin's egg he had found beneath a tree. Hannah found herself looking forward to his visits, to the sound of his voice and the warmth of his smile. She began to lower her walls, bit by bit, sharing more of herself than she had with anyone in years. They went on walks together in the evenings, exploring the trails along the Arkansas River. Jack told her about the places he had been, the things he had seen. He described the mountains of Colorado, the plains of Kansas, the vastness of the Texas sky. "Why did you keep moving?" Hannah asked one evening as they sat on the riverbank, watching the water flow past. "I was looking for something, but I did not know what. Now I think I have found it." "What have you found?" "Home, or at least the beginning of one." Hannah's heart fluttered at his words, but she tried to stay practical. "The cattle drive is in 2 weeks. You are contracted to go, I know. It will be gone for months, maybe longer. I know that too." "So what happens to us?" Jack turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I come back. I come back to you and we figure out what comes next. You might change your mind. You might get out there on the trail and realize this was just a passing fancy." "Hannah, look at me." She did, meeting his serious gaze. "I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. This is not a passing fancy. You have gotten under my skin, into my heart. When I am with you, I feel like I have finally found the thing I have been searching for all these years." "And what is that?" "Purpose, meaning, someone worth building a life with." Tears pricked at Hannah's eyes. She wanted so badly to believe him, but fear still gripped her heart. "What if you do not come back? What if something happens on the trail?" "Then I will die knowing that I loved you, and that for a little while I made you smile." "That is not funny, Jack. I am not joking. Life is uncertain, Hannah. Tomorrow is not promised to anyone, but that does not mean we should not reach for happiness when it is right in front of us." Hannah was quiet for a long moment, watching the river, thinking about everything she had been through, everything she had survived. Maybe Jack was right. Maybe closing herself off to protect her heart meant also closing herself off to any chance of real happiness. "I am afraid," she finally said. "I know you are. But I will make you a promise, Hannah Adelaide. I promise that I will come back to you. I promise that I will write you letters from every town we pass through. I promise that I will think about you every single day I am gone. And when I get back, I promise I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that love is not a fairy tale. It is something real and solid and worth fighting for. I thought love was a fairy tale until you said you would make it real for me, Hannah whispered, the words catching in her throat. Jack smiled, that beautiful, lopsided smile that made her heart race. Then let me prove it. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Hannah did not want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted to finally let herself feel something good. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, a kiss full of promise and patience. Hannah's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. The kiss deepened, and Hannah felt something inside her shift and open, like a door that had been locked for too long finally swinging wide. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Jack rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Hannah. I know it is fast, I know it is crazy, but I do. I love you. Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but for once they were not tears of pain or disappointment. I think I love you too, and that terrifies me. We will be terrified together. They stayed by the river until the stars came out, talking and kissing and making plans for when Jack returned. It felt surreal to Hannah, this happiness, this hope. She kept waiting for something to go wrong, for the other shoe to drop. But Jack just held her hand and made her laugh, and slowly she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The 2 weeks before the cattle drive passed far too quickly. Hannah and Jack spent every possible moment together. He took her to dinner at the hotel restaurant, a luxury Hannah had never been able to afford. They went to a traveling show that came through town, marveling at the acrobats and musicians. They simply sat on her porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. Jack met Mr. Miller properly and charmed the older man within minutes. He even encountered Hannah's father one evening outside the saloon. Thomas Adelaide was drunk, as usual, and barely recognized his own daughter. Jack was polite but cool and later told Hannah that he understood why she kept her distance. You did not choose your father, he said. We do not get to pick our family, but you turned out good despite him, and that is what matters. 3 days before he was set to leave, Jack took Hannah to a small jewelry shop in the next town over. He had borrowed a horse and buggy from the ranch, and they made the journey in the golden light of late afternoon. What are we doing here? Hannah asked as he helped her down from the buggy. You will see. Inside, the shop was filled with delicate treasures, watches and rings and brooches that sparkled in the lamplight. Jack spoke quietly with the shopkeeper, an elderly man with spectacles perched on his nose, and then turned to Hannah. Pick one. What? Pick a ring. Nothing too fancy, I cannot afford that yet, but something you like, something that will remind you of me while I am gone. Hannah's hand flew to her throat. Jack, you do not have to do this. I want to. Please, Hannah, let me do this for you. She walked slowly along the glass cases, her eyes scanning the various pieces. Most were far too elaborate, encrusted with stones she could not even name. But then she saw it, tucked in the corner of one case. A simple silver band with a small green stone set in the center. That one, she said, pointing. The shopkeeper retrieved it and handed it to Jack, who took Hannah's left hand and slid it onto her ring finger. It fit perfectly. It is an emerald, the shopkeeper said. Small but good quality, the silver is sterling. Jack paid for it, and Hannah stared at her hand, at this symbol of something she was still learning to trust. It is beautiful, she whispered. Not as beautiful as you. On the ride back to Benton, Hannah leaned against Jack's shoulder, the ring warm on her finger. When you come back, she said softly, what happens then? Then we get married if you will have me. We use the money I have saved and the wages from this drive to buy some land. We build a house, start a herd, make a life together. You have it all planned out. I have been thinking about it since the day I walked into that store and saw you scowling at your ledger. I was not scowling. You were definitely scowling, but it was the most beautiful scowl I had ever seen. Hannah laughed and smacked his arm playfully. You are ridiculous. I am in love. The night before Jack left, they sat on Hannah's porch long after dark. She was curled against his side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them trying to memorize the feeling of being close. I am going to miss you, Hannah said, her voice small. I am going to miss you too. But I will be back before you know it. The drive should take 3 months, maybe 4 at most. I will be home by Christmas. That feels like forever. I will write every chance I get, and you have to promise to write back. I promise. Jack tilted her chin up with his finger, looking deep into her eyes. And Hannah, you have to promise me something else. What? Promise me you will not let your fear convince you this is not real. Promise me you will not talk yourself out of this while I am gone. Hannah swallowed hard. He knew her too well, knew that her instinct would be to retreat back into her safe, lonely shell. I will try. That is all I ask. They kissed then, long and deep, pouring all their hopes and fears into the connection. When they finally pulled apart, both had tears in their eyes. Come back to me, Hannah whispered. Nothing could keep me away. The next morning, Hannah stood on the main street of Benton with what felt like the entire town, watching the cowboys prepare for the drive. There were 30 men in total and over 500 head of cattle. The air was filled with the sounds of lowing cattle, shouting men, and creaking wagons. Jack found her in the crowd, looking handsome in his riding gear, his hat pulled low against the morning sun. He pulled her aside, away from curious eyes. This is not goodbye, he said firmly. This is just see you later. See you later, Hannah repeated, trying to keep her voice steady. He kissed her one more time, quick and hard, and then he was swinging up into his saddle. The trail boss called out, and the massive herd began to move, a river of cattle and dust heading north. Hannah stood watching long after Jack disappeared from view, her hand pressed against her chest, the ring on her finger catching the light. Around her, other women were returning to their daily routines, but she could not seem to make her feet move. He will be back, dear, a kind voice said. Hannah turned to find Mrs. Patterson, the minister's wife, standing beside her. I saw the way that young man looked at you. That is a man who knows what he wants. I hope you are right. I am always right about matters of the heart. You just keep faith. But keeping faith proved harder than Hannah expected. The first week after Jack left felt like a year. The store seemed duller without his visits, the evenings longer without his company. She threw herself into work, taking on extra tasks for Mr. Miller, reorganizing the entire stockroom, anything to keep her mind occupied. The first letter arrived 2 weeks after Jack left, delivered by a rider passing through town on his way back from Fort Smith. Hannah's hands shook as she opened it. My dearest Hannah, I am writing this by firelight on our 12th night on the trail. We have covered near about 100 miles, and the cattle are settling into the routine. The work is hard but honest, and I am earning every penny of my wages. But none of that matters as much as telling you that I miss you. I miss your smile, the way you bite your lower lip when you are concentrating, the sound of your laugh. I miss the smell of your hair and the way you fit perfectly against my side when we sit together. I think about you every morning when I wake and every night before I sleep. The ring I gave you has a match, a simple silver band I wear on a chain around my neck. When I touch it, I think of you and the life we are going to build together. Stay strong, my love. I will be home before you know it. Yours always, Jack. Hannah read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She pressed it to her chest and let herself cry, but these were not tears of sadness. These were tears of longing, of love, of belief. She wrote back that very evening, telling him about the store, about the garden she had planted, about how much she missed him. She told him she loved him, the words coming easier on paper than they had in person. The letters became their lifeline. Every few weeks, another would arrive, sometimes two at once if the timing worked out. Jack wrote about the trail, about the other cowboys, about the towns they passed through. He wrote about his dreams for their future, describing in detail the house he wanted to build for them, the land he wanted to buy. Hannah saved every letter, tying them with a ribbon and keeping them in the drawer beside her bed. On particularly lonely nights, she would take them out and read through them, letting Jack's words wrap around her like a warm blanket. Summer turned to fall, and the leaves on the trees around Benton began to change color. Hannah's garden produced more vegetables than she could use, and she shared them with neighbors, with Mr. Miller, even leaving a basket on her father's doorstep, though she never saw him to know if he ate them. She had changed since Jack came into her life. People in town noticed it, commented on it. She smiled more, laughed more easily. She made friends with some of the other women her age, something she had never bothered to do before. She let herself hope, let herself plan for a future that included happiness. October came, and with it a letter that made Hannah's blood run cold. Jack wrote about an accident during a river crossing. 3 cattle had been lost, and one of the cowboys, a young man named Tommy, had nearly drowned before Jack and another man pulled him out. "I am fine," Jack assured her in the letter. "Not a scratch on me." But it reminded me how quickly things can change, how fragile life can be. It made me think of you, Hannah, and how grateful I am that you took a chance on me. No matter what happens, know that loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life. Hannah clutched the letter to her chest and prayed harder than she had since her mother died. She prayed for Jack's safety, for his return, for their future together. She went to church on Sunday and lit a candle, not caring who saw or what they thought. November brought cold rain and early frost. The letters slowed as the cattle drive pushed toward its final destination in Kansas. Hannah tried not to worry, but every day that passed without word from Jack felt like an eternity. Then, one gray morning in late November, Mr. Miller pulled her aside at the store. "Hannah, dear, I heard in town this morning that the Harrison cattle drive made it to Dodge City. They should be settling accounts and heading home within the week." Hannah's heart leaped into her throat. "He is coming home. Should be here by the first week of December, from what I hear." She threw her arms around the surprised shopkeeper and kissed his weathered cheek. "Thank you, Mr. Miller, thank you." The next week was torture. Hannah cleaned her cottage from top to bottom. She sewed a new dress, pale blue with white lace at the collar and cuffs. She made plans in her head, imagining their reunion 1,000 different ways. And then, on a cold but clear December morning, he was there. Hannah was arranging a display in the store window when she saw him ride past. Her breath caught. She dropped the bolt of fabric she was holding and ran, actually ran out the door and into the street. "Jack," she called. He turned in his saddle, and when he saw her, his face lit up with such joy that Hannah felt tears spring to her eyes. He dismounted in one fluid motion and caught her as she launched herself into his arms. They held each other in the middle of the street, not caring that half the town was watching. Hannah buried her face in his neck, breathing in the scent of him, reassuring herself that he was real, that he was here. "You came back," she sobbed. "You really came back." "I told you I would," Jack murmured into her hair. "Nothing could have kept me away." He pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. I love you, Hannah Adelaide. I have thought about nothing but you for 4 months. Now I am home, and I am never leaving you again. I love you too, Hannah said, the words flowing easily now. I love you so much. Jack kissed her right there in the street, a deep, claiming kiss that left no doubt in anyone's mind about their feelings for each other. When they finally broke apart, Hannah was laughing and crying at the same time. Come on, she said, tugging his hand. You need to eat something that was not cooked over a campfire, and I need to make sure you are really real. They went to the hotel restaurant, the same one they had gone to on their first real date. Over steak and potatoes, Jack told her about the final weeks of the drive, about settling the cattle in Dodge City, about the wages he had earned. It is enough, he said, his eyes shining. Between what I had saved and what I made on the drive, I have enough to make a down payment on land. There is a parcel about 5 miles outside town, 40 acres with a creek running through it. The owner is willing to sell on contract. Hannah's heart raced. You already looked at it. I stopped there on my way into town. I could not wait. Hannah, it is perfect. There is a spot near the creek that would be ideal for a house, and the grazing is good. We could start with a small herd, build it up over time. Hannah asked softly. Jack reached across the table and took her hand, the one wearing the ring he had given her. Marry me, Hannah. I know we talked about it before I left, but I am asking you properly now. Be my wife. Build this life with me. Let me prove to you every single day that love is not just a fairy tale. Yes, Hannah said without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. Jack let out a whoop that made everyone in the restaurant turn and stare. He came around the table and pulled Hannah to her feet, spinning her around as she laughed. We are getting married, he announced to the entire room. This woman right here is going to be my wife. Several of the diners applauded, and Hannah hid her face in Jack's chest, embarrassed but happier than she could ever remember being. They were married 2 weeks later in the little white church on the hill. It was a small ceremony, just a handful of people who mattered. Mr. Miller walked Hannah down the aisle since her father was nowhere to be found, probably passed out drunk in some corner of town. Hannah found she did not care. She had Jack, and that was enough. She wore a dress she had made herself, simple white cotton with blue flowers embroidered along the hem. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, woven through with ribbons. She carried a bouquet of winter greenery and dried flowers. Jack stood at the altar looking nervous and excited in his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his eyes locked on her as she walked toward him. When she reached his side, he took her hand and squeezed it gently. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, Jack kissed her with such tenderness that Hannah felt her heart might burst. I love you, Mrs. Edwards, he whispered against her lips. I love you too, Mr. Edwards. They had a small reception in the church hall, with cake and punch and well wishes from their friends. As the afternoon turned to evening, Jack and Hannah slipped away, heading to their new home. Jack had been working on the property for the past 2 weeks, and he had accomplished more than Hannah thought possible. There was a small but sturdy cabin, just one room for now with a loft above, but it had a good stone fireplace, glass windows, and a solid roof. Jack had built furniture with his own hands, a bed frame, a table, chairs, even shelves for Hannah's books and keepsakes. It is not much yet, he said as he carried her over the threshold, but it is ours, and we will make it into something wonderful. Hannah looked around the cabin, at the warm fire burning in the hearth, at the quilt on the bed that Mrs. Patterson had gifted them, at the flowers Jack had placed in a jar on the table. It was not fancy, but it was theirs. It was home. It is perfect, she said. That night, in the warmth of their new home, Jack and Hannah became husband and wife in every sense. He was gentle and patient, understanding that this was all new to her. He kissed away her nervousness, whispering words of love and reassurance until she relaxed in his arms. And when they finally came together, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like two pieces of a puzzle finally fitting into place. Hannah held Jack close, marveling at how safe she felt, how cherished, how loved. Afterward, they lay tangled together beneath the quilt, the fire casting flickering shadows on the walls. Jack traced lazy patterns on Hannah's bare shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how wrong I was." "About what?" "About love. About fairy tales. I thought they were not real, that they were just stories to make lonely people feel better. But this, us, it is real. It is better than any fairy tale because it is ours." Jack rolled onto his side so he could look at her properly. "You made it real, Hannah. You took a chance on a dusty cowboy with big dreams and not much else. You let me into your heart even though you were scared. That took courage. You made it easy. You never pushed, never demanded. You just kept showing up, kept being patient, kept loving me until I could not help but love you back. I will keep doing that every day for the rest of our lives." They kissed, slow and sweet, and then Hannah nestled against Jack's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Tell me about our future," she murmured. "Tell me what it is going to look like." Jack was quiet for a moment, and Hannah could feel him thinking. Then he began to speak, his voice soft in the darkness. "We are going to wake up every morning in this cabin, at least until we can build a bigger house. You are going to make coffee while I go check on the animals. We will have breakfast together, planning our day. Then I will head out to work the land while you tend the garden, maybe work a few hours at the store if you still want to. I think I would like that for a while at least. In the evenings, we will have dinner together and talk about our day. Maybe we will sit on the porch and watch the sunset. And when we go to bed, I will hold you just like this and thank God that I found you. What about children?" Jack's arms tightened around her. "We will have a whole passel of them if you want. Sons to help with the ranch, daughters with their mother's green eyes and stubborn streak." Hannah laughed softly. "I am not stubborn. You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met, but I love that about you." "I want children," Hannah said quietly. "I want to give them the kind of childhood I did not have, full of love and laughter and security." "We will," Jack promised. "We will give them everything we did not have, and they will grow up knowing they are loved." Hannah tilted her head back to kiss him again, and they lost themselves in each other once more, celebrating their love and their future. The winter months were hard but happy. Jack worked the land, building fences, clearing fields, preparing for the spring when they would buy their first cattle. Hannah divided her time between the cabin and the store, saving every penny she could to add to their growing stake. They fell into an easy rhythm, learning each other's habits and quirks. Jack sang while he worked, tuneless but enthusiastic. Hannah talked to herself when she was concentrating, muttering about numbers or recipes or whatever was on her mind. Jack left his boots right where he took them off. Hannah rearranged the kitchen shelves every few weeks until things were exactly how she wanted them. But these small irritations were nothing compared to the joy of sharing a life together. They laughed more than Hannah had thought possible. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. They made love frequently, sometimes with passionate intensity, sometimes with sweet tenderness. As winter gave way to spring, they were able to purchase a small herd of 20 cattle. It was not much, but it was a start. Jack also bought 2 horses, a sturdy mare named Rosie and a gelding called Copper, and a milk cow that Hannah named Daisy. Hannah's garden flourished, and she spent hours tending the vegetables, herbs, and flowers she had planted. She canned and preserved everything she could, stocking their small pantry for the next winter. She learned to make cheese from Daisy's milk, and bread that Jack declared was the best he had ever tasted. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Hannah turned to Jack with news that made her both excited and nervous. "Jack, I need to tell you something." He looked at her, his expression immediately concerned. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong, at least I do not think so, I hope not." She took a deep breath. "I am with child." For a moment Jack just stared at her, then a slow, beautiful smile spread across his face. "Truly, truly. I am about 2 months along, I think. I wanted to be sure before I told you." Jack let out a whoop and stood, pulling Hannah up with him and spinning her around carefully. "We are having a baby. Hannah, we are having a baby. You are happy?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy, I am over the moon. I am going to be a father. You are going to be a mother. We are going to have a family." He kissed her deeply, his hands gentle on her waist as if she were suddenly made of glass. When will the baby come?" "January, I think. Just after the New Year." "January," Jack repeated, wonder in his voice. "Our first baby will be born in 1879. A new year, a new life." Over the next months, Jack became wonderfully overprotective. He did not want Hannah lifting anything heavy, working too hard, or spending too much time on her feet. Hannah found it both touching and slightly exasperating. "Jack, I am pregnant, not broken," she said one day when he tried to stop her from carrying a basket of laundry. "I know, but I want to take care of you. I want to make sure you and the baby are safe." Hannah softened at the worry in his eyes. "We are safe. We are healthy. The doctor says everything looks good. I just want to do this right." She took his face in her hands. "You are doing everything right. You are going to be a wonderful father." As summer turned to fall, Hannah's belly grew round with their child. Jack loved to place his hands on her stomach, feeling the baby kick and move. He talked to the baby constantly, telling stories about the ranch, about their plans, about how loved this child already was. They began preparing for the baby's arrival. Jack built a beautiful cradle from oak wood, carving their initials and the baby's expected birth year into the headboard. Hannah sewed tiny clothes, blankets, and diapers. Mrs. Patterson and some of the other women from church threw Hannah a small party, gifting her with more baby items and advice. Even Mr. Miller got involved, giving Hannah time off work and insisting that Jack take whatever supplies they needed from the store at cost. "You two are like the children I never had," the kind old man said. "I want to help however I can." By December, everything was ready. The cradle sat beside their bed, filled with soft blankets. The tiny clothes were washed and folded. A stack of clean diapers waited on the shelf. All they needed now was the baby. Hannah's back ached constantly, and she could not sleep for more than a few hours at a time. She was uncomfortable and impatient, ready for this pregnancy to be over, but she was also a little scared. "What if I am not a good mother?" she asked Jack one night as they lay in bed. "You are going to be an amazing mother." "How do you know?" "Because I have seen the way you care for everything and everyone around you. I have seen your kindness, your strength, your capacity to love. This baby is going to be so lucky to have you." "What if something goes wrong?" Jack pulled her close. "Then we will handle it together." "But nothing is going to go wrong. You are healthy, the baby is healthy. In a few weeks, we are going to be holding our child, and all this worry will seem silly." He was right, though it did not feel silly at the time. On a cold January night, 2 weeks after the new year began, Hannah's labor started. Jack rode into town at breakneck speed to fetch the doctor and Mrs. Patterson, who had agreed to help with the birth. The labor was long and difficult. Hannah had never experienced such pain, had never imagined her body could hurt so much. But Jack was there through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her brow with a cool cloth, whispering encouragement. "You can do this," he said over and over. "You are the strongest person I know. Just a little longer, my love." Finally, after nearly 12 hours of labor, their baby was born. The doctor held up a squalling, red-faced infant and announced, "It is a boy. You have a son." Hannah fell back against the pillows, exhausted but elated. Jack was crying openly, tears streaming down his face as the doctor placed the tiny baby, cleaned and wrapped in a blanket, into Hannah's arms. "He is perfect," Jack whispered, staring at his son in awe. The baby was perfect. He had a shock of dark hair like his father, and when he opened his eyes, they were a hazy blue-gray that would likely change in the coming weeks. His little hands grabbed at Hannah's finger, and she felt a surge of love so powerful it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she murmured. "Welcome to the world." They named him James William Edwards, after Jack's father, but from the very beginning they called him Jamie. The early weeks with a newborn were challenging. Jamie needed to be fed every few hours, day and night. He cried when he was hungry, when he was wet, when he just wanted to be held. Hannah was exhausted, her body still recovering from the birth, her emotions all over the place. But Jack was wonderful. He walked the floor with Jamie when Hannah needed to rest, changed diapers without complaint, and never once made her feel like she was alone in this. They were a team, partners in every sense of the word. As winter gave way to spring, Jamie grew and changed, becoming more alert and responsive. He smiled at his parents, gurgled and cooed, grabbed at anything within reach. Watching Jack with their son made Hannah fall in love with him all over again. He was gentle and patient, singing to Jamie, talking to him, treating the infant like he was the most important person in the world. The ranch continued to grow. The cattle herd increased, and they were able to buy more land. Jack hired a hand to help with the work, a young man named Marcus who lived in a small bunkhouse Jack built at the edge of the property. Hannah returned to working a few hours a week at the store, bringing Jamie with her in a basket. Mr. Miller doted on the baby, as did all the customers. Jamie was a happy child, quick to smile and laugh, and he brought joy to everyone who met him. As the months passed and Jamie grew, Hannah reflected on how much her life had changed in just 2 short years. She had gone from a woman who believed love was a fairy tale to a wife and mother living a life better than anything she could have imagined. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Jamie play with the wooden blocks Jack had made him, she turned to her husband. "You remember the day we met?" she asked. "Of course. You were scowling at that ledger like it had personally offended you." Hannah laughed. "I was not scowling." "You definitely were, but I took one look at you and knew my life was about to change. I thought you were just another drifter, another man who would make promises he had no intention of keeping. And now," Hannah looked at Jack, at their son, at the home they had built together. "Now I know better. You kept every promise you made. You came back to me. You made love real for me." Jack set down his coffee cup and pulled Hannah close. "You made it real for both of us. You took a chance on me, on us. You let yourself hope again, even though you were scared. That is the bravest thing I have ever seen anyone do." They kissed, a sweet, lingering kiss that held all the love and commitment they felt for each other. "I want more," Hannah said suddenly. "More what?" "More of this. More babies, more memories, more life. I want to fill this house with children and laughter. I want to grow old with you, watching our grandchildren play in this same yard. I want it all, Jack." "Then we will have it all," he promised. "Every bit of it." And they did. Over the next several years, their family grew. 2 years after Jamie was born, Hannah gave birth to a daughter they named Grace Elizabeth. She had Hannah's red hair and green eyes, and she was as stubborn as her mother from the very beginning. 3 years after Grace came twin boys, Thomas and Daniel. They were identical, and from the moment they could crawl, they were into everything. Jack joked that they were punishment for some past sin, but he adored them completely. The cabin had long since been expanded into a proper house, with 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen, a formal parlor, and a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. The cattle herd had grown to over 100 head, and they had several horses as well. The Edwards Ranch had become one of the most successful in the area. But more than the material success, what mattered was the love that filled the house. The children grew up secure and happy, never doubting for a moment that they were cherished. Jack and Hannah taught them the value of hard work, honesty, and kindness. Jamie grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved working the ranch with his father. Grace was creative and fierce, always making up stories and organizing her brothers into elaborate games. The twins were wild and adventurous, constantly testing boundaries but deeply loyal to their family. Hannah's father died when Jamie was 5, his liver finally giving out after years of hard drinking. Hannah felt sadness for the man he could have been, but no real grief. She had Jack and her children, and that was all the family she needed. Mr. Miller retired when Hannah was 28, selling the store to a young couple from Little Rock. He lived out his remaining years in a small cottage behind the church, spending his time whittling toys for the Edwards children and other young ones in town. When he died peacefully in his sleep at 73, Hannah wept for the father figure he had been to her. As the years passed, Jack and Hannah settled into a comfortable rhythm. They still found time for each other, still had conversations that lasted long into the night, still made love with the same passion they had felt as newlyweds. They faced challenges, of course. There were years when the weather was bad and the cattle did not thrive. There were illnesses and injuries. There were moments of fear and frustration. But they faced everything together, their love providing a foundation strong enough to weather any storm. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Jack surprised Hannah with a trip to Hot Springs. They left the children with Mrs. Patterson, who was thrilled to have them, and spent a week just the 2 of them, soaking in the thermal baths, eating in restaurants, and remembering what it felt like to be young and carefree. "Thank you," Hannah said on their last night there as they sat on the balcony of their hotel room watching the stars. "For what? For everything. For seeing something in me worth fighting for being patient when I was scared, for building this life with me." Jack took her hand the same way he had so many times before. "You saved me, Hannah. I was drifting, looking for something I could not name. And then I walked into that store and found you, and suddenly everything made sense. You gave me purpose, a home, a family. I should be thanking you." "We saved each other," Hannah said softly, "and we built something beautiful together." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, hearts full. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow as life always does. The children grew up and began lives of their own. Jamie married a sweet girl named Sarah and took over running the ranch. Grace married a teacher and moved to Little Rock, though she visited often with her growing family. Thomas became a horse trader, traveling across the territories, but always coming home. Daniel surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer, the first in the family to attend university. Jack and Hannah became grandparents, and then great-grandparents. They watched their legacy grow, surrounded always by love and laughter. In 1920, as Hannah was approaching her 64th birthday, she and Jack sat on their porch as they had done countless times over the decades. Their hair was silver now, their faces lined with the marks of a life well lived, but their love had not diminished. If anything, it had grown deeper, richer, more profound. "Remember when I said I thought love was a fairy tale?" Hannah asked. Jack, who sometimes forgot what he had eaten for breakfast but never forgot anything about his wife, smiled. I remember. And I remember telling you I would make it real for you. You did. You made it real in ways I never imagined possible. We made it real together. A gaggle of grandchildren played in the yard, their shouts and laughter carrying on the warm summer breeze. Jamie and Sarah's eldest son was teaching the younger children to rope a fence post. Grace's daughters were picking flowers to make crowns. It was a scene of perfect contentment. I love you, Hannah Edwards, Jack said, the same words he had spoken thousands of times over their 42 years of marriage. I love you too, Jack Edwards, Hannah replied, meaning it more with each passing day. They sat together, hands clasped, watching the sun set over the land they had built their life on. They had faced every challenge together, celebrated every triumph together, raised 4 children together and loved each other through it all. It was not a fairy tale. It was better than a fairy tale. It was real, and it was theirs, and it was the most beautiful thing Hannah Adelaide Edwards had ever known. Jack passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1922, with Hannah holding his hand. He was 67 years old, and he had lived every single day of his life with purpose and love. At his funeral, the church was packed with people whose lives he had touched, whose hearts he had warmed with his kindness and generosity. Hannah mourned him deeply, but not hopelessly. She had loved him for over 4 decades. She had built a life with him that had meaning and substance. She had children and grandchildren who carried forward the legacy of love they had created together. She lived 6 more years, spending her time with family, tending her garden, writing down the story of her life so that future generations would know where they came from. She wrote about the scared girl she had been, about the dusty cowboy who had walked into a general store and changed everything, about the love that had transformed them both. Hannah Adelaide Edwards passed away in the spring of 1928, surrounded by her children, with Jack's silver ring still on her finger and his final letter tucked against her heart. She was 71 years old, and she had lived a life filled with love. They buried her beside Jack on the hill overlooking their ranch, the land they had claimed together, the home they had built with their own hands and hearts. A simple stone marked their graves: Jackson Edwards, 1855–1922, Hannah Adelaide Edwards, 1857–1928. Together they proved that love is real. And it was real. It was gloriously, beautifully, perfectly real. From the moment a cowboy walked into a general store in Benton, Arkansas, until the moment Hannah took her last breath, their love had been the truest thing in both of their lives. The ranch continued through the generations, passed down to Jamie and his descendants. The house Jack had built with his own hands still stood, expanded and updated but fundamentally unchanged. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren played in the same yard, swam in the same creek, rode horses across the same fields. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right on a summer evening, when the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the family swore they could feel Jack and Hannah there with them, sitting on the porch, hands clasped, watching over the legacy of love they had created. Because true love does not end with death. It lives on in the hearts of those left behind, in the stories passed down through generations, in the lives built on the foundation 2 people created together. Hannah Adelaide had thought love was a fairy tale, a pretty lie told to make the harsh realities of life seem bearable. But Jackson Edwards had promised to make it real for her, and he had kept that promise every single day of his life. He had shown her that love was not about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about showing up day after day through good times and bad. It was about choosing each other, again and again, no matter what life threw at them. It was about building something together, brick by brick, year by year, until you had created a life so beautiful that it took your breath away. It was about being brave enough to hope, even when hope seemed foolish. It was about taking a chance on someone, on something, on the possibility that life could be better than you had ever imagined. And in the end, that is exactly what Hannah and Jack had done. They had taken a chance on each other, on love, on the future. And they had built something that would outlast them both, something that would echo through the generations, proving that love was not a fairy tale at all. It was real. It was solid. It was the most powerful force in the universe. And it all started with a dusty cowboy walking into a general store, looking at a scowling girl with green eyes, and deciding that she was worth fighting for. It started with a scared young woman who had given up on love, deciding to take one more chance, to believe one more time, to let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. They were both right. It was different. It was real. It was everything they had ever dreamed of and more. And that, in the end, was the greatest love story Benton, Arkansas, had ever seen. Not because it was perfect, but because it was true. Not because it was easy, but because they chose each other, day after day, year after year, until death finally parted them. But even death could not truly separate them. Their love lived on in their children, in the ranch they had built, in the town they had been part of, in every life they had touched. It lived on in the letters Hannah had saved, in the cradle Jack had carved, in the house they had filled with laughter and love. It lived on because real love always does. It transforms everything it touches, creating ripples that spread outward through time, touching lives that the original lovers will never know about, creating a legacy that lasts forever. Hannah Adelaide Edwards had learned that lesson well. Love was not a fairy tale. It was work and commitment and choosing to believe in something bigger than yourself. It was Jack Edwards keeping his promise to come back to her. It was building a life together, one day at a time. It was raising children and facing challenges, and never, ever giving up on each other. It was real, and it was theirs, and it was the most beautiful thing that had ever happened to either of them. And that reality, that solid, lasting, transformative reality, was worth more than any fairy tale could ever be, because fairy tales end with happily ever after. But real love continues. It grows and changes and deepens. It creates new stories, new generations, new possibilities. It builds a legacy that lasts long after the original lovers are gone, and in the end, that was exactly what Jack and Hannah had created together. Not a fairy tale, but something far better. Something real, something lasting, something that would echo through the ages as proof that love, true love, was the most powerful force in the universe. They had proven it together, those two unlikely lovers in the Wild West town of Benton, Arkansas. The girl who had given up on love and the cowboy who had promised to make it real for her. Together, they had built something beautiful, something that would last forever. And that is the greatest love story of all. Not the one that ends with the wedding or the first kiss or the promise of forever. But the one that keeps going, that faces life's challenges head on, that builds something lasting and real and true. Jack Edwards had walked into that general store in 1878 and changed Hannah Adelaide's life forever. He had seen past her walls and her fear to the woman underneath, the woman who was capable of such deep love if only she could find the courage to believe again. And Hannah had found that courage. She had taken the risk, made the leap, believed in the possibility of something better. Together, they had created a love story for the ages, one that proved beyond any doubt that love was not a fairy tale. It was real. It was theirs, and it would last forever.